It's finally here. After 8 months of play, the grand finals of the 2019 Overwatch League season are upon us, and what's more fitting than having the two most dominant teams of the year going head-to-head in the big game. The Vancouver Titans and San Francisco Shock finished with the top 2 records in the regular season and have shown nothing but dominance along the way. Combined, they have 48 regular season wins, 5 stage finals appearances, 2 stage titles, and 20 playoff wins if you count stages 1 through 3. Not to mention that many of their players won an award of some kind, whether it was Roll Stars or something a bit more significant, such as Sinatra winning MVP or Hoxel taking home Rookie of the Year. Whether it was GOATs or 2-2-2, these were the teams who consistently destroyed the opposition through their strong rosters and perfect synergy. I have to give it up to both of them for staying strong through every single meta. Neither of them faltered. They persevered through the tough losses, and their determination has punched their tickets to Philadelphia. That said, this will be the 5th and final installment of the Shock vs Titans rivalry in 2019. The series is currently tied up at 2 apiece, and what better way to break the tie than when the stakes are at their highest? But who comes out on top in this clash of heavyweights? Let's compare and contrast both teams and how things have gone for them in the playoffs so far. So starting with the Vancouver Titans, they were the top seed coming into the playoffs, and they showed exactly why. They won all 3 of their winners bracket matches, which allowed for them to go down a pretty short path to make it to Philadelphia. Although all 3 of those matches were pretty close in terms of the map score, I would say Vancouver was still in control for the most part in 2 of them. There were some struggles early on with the Dynasty and Gladiators matches, but once they made the necessary adjustments, they never looked back. The NYXL match was a bit different though. It was a back and forth affair the entire game, and they ended up just barely coming out on top in that decisive map 7. There's been some ups and downs in their playoff run so far, but one thing has remained constant. They win. Their ability to win big games has not faltered in the playoffs at all. The clutch factor is without a doubt present with these guys still. Even if GOATS is gone, they still make plays when it matters the most. And a big reason for this has to do with their DPS. Hoxel and Salmansu have been unreal. Their Reaper Doomfist combo is one of the strongest in the league from what I've seen, and Hoxel has always been a big playmaker for this team ever since the Runaway days, so it's no shock to see him show up on a map-to-map basis. He was a good Doomfist pre-Owl, and he's still a good Doomfist now. Nothing has changed with this guy. It doesn't matter whether it's Brigida, Genji, Pharah, or Doomfist. He always seems to be top tier on whatever hero he's on. Every single time Vancouver has been in need of a bailout in the playoffs, he has stepped up to the plate and delivered. Salmansu being a big playmaker though is a bit more of a surprise. For a while he kind of seemed like nothing more than a Zarya one-trick, but stage 4 in the playoffs have really changed my view on the guy when it comes to his DPS. As mentioned previously, I have been loving his Reaper. It's been very consistent, and he always seems to come up big for his team if Hoxel doesn't. He's been great with finding opening picks or turning the tide of battle with a well-timed Death Blossom. Him and Hoxel are proving to be quite the formidable DPS duo. While the DPS in my opinion have been the stars in their playoff run, the rest of Vancouver's lineup is not to be overlooked either. For starters, Twilight and Slime never seem to have an off day, like ever. It's actually ridiculous how consistent they are. Slime's Lucio is still as good as ever, and Twilight kills it on both the Ana and Moira. And how about the tank line? They have been more than holding their own every single match, and I find that to be very impressive. TZ comes in and takes the main tank role from Bumper, who's been playing it all year, and it's like nothing has changed from a performance standpoint of the team as a whole. If anything, they look even better with TZ than they do with Bumper, which kind of does make sense just because Bumper's Orisa was pretty lackluster. TZ on the other hand appears to be a whole lot more capable on the hero. His positioning and overall coordination with his teammates has been solid. I have no complaints. Super impressive stuff from TZ. He may be a new member to this team, but he certainly doesn't act like it. And how about Janu? He was the one on this team who had to pick up Sigma, and I have to say, he's looked pretty good so far. I don't know if I'd say he's without a doubt a top 3 Sigma in the playoffs or anything, but he's without a doubt serviceable at the very least. Regardless of where you think Janu ranks on Sigma, we all have to admit that he's been getting the job done. That NYXL game in particular is where he shined in my opinion. Early on it kind of seemed like Mecha was getting the better of him, but Janu quickly turned the tides after the first few maps. Janu is consistent, doesn't make a ton of mistakes, and shows the ability to quickly adapt when he needs to. Overall, this Vancouver team looks confident and extremely capable in the current meta. But what about their opponents? Well, the Shock's journey to get here was a bit more complicated. I personally saw the Shock as the favorites to win the final, so I kind of expected them to just roll through the winners bracket and get to the finals, kind of like in the way Vancouver would end up doing instead. But the Overwatch gods had different plans. They wanted to see how they deal with adversity, so they played a cruel joke on the Shock by having them lose via C9 to the Atlanta Reign. That disappointed look on Moth's face after it happened says it all. In a hard-fought back-and-forth 7-map thriller, they lost because they forgot to touch the payload. And it's sad too because they likely would have held that final attack from the Reign and won the series if it weren't for that mental lapse. But as I said, the Overwatch gods had other plans for them, but the Shock wouldn't let this upset that came in embarrassing fashion get to them. That loss to Atlanta really woke them up. Those boys played angry in the losers bracket, and it shows with how much they dominated the competition. It honestly reminds me a lot of the Spitfires run in 2018. They lost that first game to the Gladiators, but then woke up and never really looked back, but the Shock are taking it to another level. Since that loss to the Reign, they haven't dropped a single map. Now, some of those maps were pretty close, but at the end of the day, they still 4-0'd the Spitfire, Gladiator, Spark, and NYXL in consecutive games. The wins over Hangzhou and New York in particular were pretty eye-catching. The Spark were coming off 2 consecutive 4-0s of their own in the losers bracket, and the NYXL were just 1 map away from making it to the grand finals in their loss to Vancouver. But the Shock came in and made it seem like those teams were nothing. The Shock are simply playing at a different level right now. That loss to Atlanta could very well end up being a blessing in disguise. They have been unstoppable. Each individual player on that starting lineup has elevated their play even further during their playoff run, which I didn't even think was possible. But where do I even start? Every player has been so good. I guess I'll begin with the tank line. Smurf consistently has shown up on the Orisa. In my opinion, he's been playing around the same level as TZ really, and what about Choyobin? Is it just me, or has he been looking stronger and stronger on the Sigma with every passing game? I swear he really wasn't anything special in that first game or two, but ever since then, he's been turning up. He's really hit his stride. I'm impressed with how much he's improved in such little time, but I can't say I'm all that surprised. Choyobin is arguably the #1 flex tank in the league after all. If he can crush the opposition on D.Va and Roadhog, then there was no reason to believe he wouldn't be able to eventually do the same on Sigma. Choyobin also tends to be really clutch, as he usually shows up when the stakes are at their highest, so you have to be feeling pretty confident with him if you're going into the finals as a Shock fan. Then of course there's the DPS. I hold a very similar stance with Sinatraa and Striker that I do with Hoxel and Summon-Su. The two groups are extremely similar. Striker has seemingly come out of nowhere as this dominant Reaper player, kind of like with Summon-Su. I feel like it's especially surprising with Striker though, because Architect was pretty good in Stage 4 on that Reaper. I never would have expected him to become the starter again. It's safe to say that Striker has been unleashed, and we've all been waiting for this the entire year. Just watching him consistently play again was something we all were looking forward to, and he has not disappointed in his triumphant return to the stage. Oh, and as a quick editor's note, yes, I saw that Striker recently hurt himself from some sort of accident, but according to his Twitter, he can still play just fine. This injury has apparently not hindered his ability to play the game. Plus, he does have about a week to heal, so I'm sure he'll be just fine. And even if he's not, I really don't think it's a huge deal. Yes, Striker is amazing, but they have another prolific Reaper player in Architect just waiting to have his name called from the bench if he's needed. Anyway though, how about Sinatraa? He's a top Doomfist player in the league like with Hoxel. The MVP of the Overwatch League is proving he isn't just a dominant Zarya and Tracer player. It turns out that he's a pretty insane Doomfist as well. Now, it's obviously up for debate here, but I think it's reasonable to say that Sinatraa and Hoxel are 2 of the top 3 Doomfist players in the playoffs. Sinatraa has continued to be a superstar and is showing exactly why the Shock paid him so much money a year ago. How many moments in the playoffs have we seen this guy pop off while showcasing perfect synergy with his tanks while executing combos? He's been making some unreal plays, and his performances have just been next level. But as amazing as the DPS have been, I personally have thought the biggest bright spot in the Shock in the playoffs so far has been their support line. Moth and Violet are playing at another level, and people just don't seem to give them the proper credit they deserve. Moth's Lucio play has been outstanding the entire year, but he somehow found a way to be even better in the playoffs. Even in that loss to Atlanta, it kind of felt like he was carrying. The boops have been huge. I know we all look at that Rialto play the most, but it goes beyond that. He's just so disruptive. There's been countless times where he boops enemies off the high ground or just out of position in general, and it usually leads to the Shock getting some sort of advantage. There's lots of these types of moments where he makes these simple yet extremely effective plays that just go underappreciated really. And what's great is that he rarely gets punished for making these big plays. His positioning and overall ult usage is usually spot on too. He consistently has been a top main support in the league, and the playoffs have not changed that. And I have to give it up to Moth for learning Baptiste as quick as he did. His transition into that hero seems so natural. It goes to show you how dedicated this guy is to improving as a player while extending his hero pool at the same time. And I have very similar praise for Violet. It would be a crime to call him anything worse than a top 5 flex support in these playoffs. His Ana and Moira have been sensational, and there is a little bit of a pleasant surprise there if you ask me. Earlier in the year, Violet only really seemed to be super effective on the Zen. He almost seemed afraid to play Ana up until around the end of Stage 3, and the team really seemed to struggle with him on Moira. With Zen no longer being crucial in the current meta, I definitely had my concerns for Violet. He was showing flashes with Ana, but his Moira was always so unimpressive, but those concerns almost evaporated immediately. Violet was already a really good player, so to see him improve so much in such a small window of time is eye-catching to say the least. Everything's been on point. He gets a ton of value from his coalescence usages when he's on Moira, and when it comes to his Ana, the sleep darts have been on the money. Take a look at his stats from the Spark matchup on Moira just to get a better idea of how dominant he's been. Nearly 100k healing, over 50k damage, and 62 coalescence kills. And keep in mind, that was over the span of 4 maps. Violet has been on fire, and it's hard to imagine he'll be slowing down anytime soon coming into the finals. So now that we've taken some time to talk about both of our combatants, it's prediction time. Who am I going to curse this time? Well, let's break it all down. So I think the outcome of this game is going to rely on a combination of 4 factors. One has to do with the tank lines. I have confidence in the DPS and supports from both sides to keep up with each other without a doubt, but I'm not so sure about the tanks. I believe that the tank line was the better day will be the team who ultimately has the edge. Smurf, TZ, Choyobin, and Jano are still similar. You have 2 good Orisa players and 2 good Sigma players who have gotten stronger as the playoffs have progressed. With how even these teams appear to be on paper, something has to give, and I think the tanks will be the most exploitable part of these 2 teams. I know it sounds dumb since all of these guys are really good, but gaining the upper hand in the tank battle will give either one of them a far better chance to win if nobody else makes any careless mistakes, in my opinion. Factor number 2 will come down to which team does a better job of punishing aggression from the other. These teams share a very similar playstyle. Each of them prefer to approach fights in a very aggressive manner, so who is going to do the better job of adjusting and finding proper ways to punish the other for getting a tad bit too aggressive? Whoever plays smarter is going to have a serious advantage, in my opinion. The third factor will revolve around which team does a better job of adjusting mid-game. We know that Vancouver's pretty good at this due to how often they go down in a series but then turn it around after adjusting. We've seen it time after time throughout the entire regular season and playoffs. In fact, we saw them do it against their grand finals opponents back in the Stage 1 championship when they were at one point down 3-2. Vancouver's ability to never be out of a match makes them dangerous, but the Shock are no stranger to on-the-fly adjustments and resilience either. Remember how I said the Titans went down 2 maps to San Francisco in the Stage 1 finals? Well, the roles were actually reversed in Stage 2. The Shock found themselves down 2-1 against Vancouver, but they came back strong by winning 3 straight maps. And what about the time they nearly reverse swept Shanghai in Stage 3? The point I'm trying to make here is that these guys don't know how to stay down. They are very good at adapting. But what I love about the Shock team is that they don't just care about counterplay. They are confident that they can outplay your team even if you're ahead in a series. The Shock and Titans are the best in the business with adaptations mid-game, so who does it better will certainly be a big factor in deciding the winner. And lastly, the final thing that will certainly play a big part in this game is control. Control maps have been a pivotal part of the success found by both teams. Vancouver in particular have gotten the edge they needed from being so good at this map type. In the winners bracket, they went 6-0 on control maps. Think about that. Half of their wins in all of their 6+ map series came from control. Their dominance on this map type has enabled them to go far, but the Shock have been pretty clutch on control themselves since that Atlanta game. Think about it. 4 straight 4-0 sweeps means that they are now 4-2 on control in the playoffs, and what's crazy is that the Shock have actually gone down to start many of the opening control maps they've been in. They went down 1-0 against London, Hangzhou, and New York, but each time they bounced back and won 2 straight to take the map. They always seem to have these slow starts, then they just flip this kind of switch almost. It's like they need a moment to warm up or something. Control's the first map type to be played twice in a series, so you already know that the team who plays better on this map type will likely gain the upper hand. That's how it typically has gone in the playoffs at least. The team to take the control maps usually end up winning the game, so I see no reason why the grand finals would be treated any differently. Okay, so with all of this in mind, I think it's time for me to pick a winner. After some careful consideration, I'm predicting the San Francisco Shock to win the grand finals over the Vancouver Titans by a final score of 4-2. It's honestly hard to pick against this Shock team right now with how dominant and confident they've looked over the last couple of weeks. I mean, they haven't lost a map since September 6th. Meanwhile, the Titans haven't really beaten any of their opponents that convincingly. It took them 6 maps to beat the Dynasty and the Gladiators and 7 for the NYXL. And I don't think I have to remind anybody out there that the Shock 4-0'd both the Gladiators and the NYXL. But I will say, if there's one team who I trust to beat the Shock, it's definitely Vancouver. They know these guys very well at this point, but I just don't know if I can realistically see the Shock losing. They are playing with unreal determination at the moment, and to put it simply, they're the hottest team in Overwatch as it currently stands. Unless the Titans come into Sunday with one hell of a game plan, I think the Shock take it and join the London Spitfire in the Overwatch League Champion Club. With that said, those are my predictions and overall thoughts on the 2019 Overwatch League Grand Finals. Who do you think will win, and what did you think of the points I brought up? Make sure to let me know down in the comments section, and if you enjoyed this content, then be sure to like and subscribe. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.